Hi, if you are watching, this is lesson number 3 for May 2024. And we're going to start with a really fun story. This is a science fiction fantasy story written by a Russian author, very famous Russian author, Isaac Asimov. And this is a futuristic story that's pretty fascinating, written in 1951. And what's fascinating about it is I think somebody would not have understood the story had it not been for the pandemic. So we're going to listen to a story that has that kind of compares what the future world looks like versus classes today. So this story is set in 2155. Now remember, the author wrote this in 1951, which means that the author had to have a pretty good idea, be able to predict kind of what was going on. And he did. And this story was written 73 years ago. Okay, so we look at schools today in 2024. You have a real teacher. In our futuristic story, we have basically AI, artificial intelligence. We have a mechanical teacher, a robot. We have a main character, Margie, who the story begins with basically the mechanical robotic teacher breaking down because it needs to be reprogrammed. And I can tell you, we real teachers break down all the time. And we have to reprogram, but we reprogram usually by starting over, trying something else. And the difference is we are human. We have feelings. We really care about what we do. So if a student is struggling, we're the first ones to say, wait, whoa, slow down, back up. What's going on? Let's figure out a way to solve the problem. Margie, in our story, is pretty much lacking motivation, fed up because she's failing geography and the computer's going really, really fast. And you know what? She just doesn't care. She didn't care that she's failing. Didn't care that she's slowed down. And I remember specifically during the pandemic, I remember kids just shutting down. So in the story, we're going to see her just really be perplexed. You know, her mom tells her, look, the computer can self-pace. What does that mean? It means whatever her level is, it will keep moving her up. And those of you who take MAP tests, you understand that. As long as you answer the question correctly, they'll throw something new at you. And some kids thrive on that. Most kids don't, as we saw in the pandemic. Okay, so kids today, we're happy to go back to school. Why? Because we know that we cannot thrive in isolation. We need human contact through teachers, through friends. We need our peers to challenge us, to connect, you know, just maybe even discuss and to relate to. And when we don't have that, we're going to break down like Margie in the story, right? And this is the future. Okay, so the computer basically, you know, she by code fits in her homework or her tests and spits out her grade right away. I'm sure it has no feelings whatsoever. You have failed the test, retake it, right? Warning, warning. Whereas a teacher would be like, okay, this is a red flag. This is not working. Let's figure out what the problem is. So here we go. The Fun They Had by Isaac Asimov, written in 1951. He smiled at her and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Margie even wrote it that night in her diary. On the page headed May 17th, 2155, she wrote, today, Tommy found a real book. It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him there was a time all stories were printed on paper. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way they were supposed to on a screen, you know. And then when they turned back to the page before, it had the same words on it that it had had when they read it the first time. Geez, said Tommy, what a waste. When you're through with the book, you just throw it away, I guess. Our television screen must have had a million books on it, and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away. Same with mine, said Margie. She was 11 and hadn't seen as many telebooks as Tommy had. He was 13. She said, where'd you find it? In my house. He pointed without looking because he was busy reading. In the attic. What's it about? School. Margie was scornful. School. What's there to write about school? I hate school. Margie always hated school, but now she hated it more than ever. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she'd been doing worse and worse until her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the county inspector. He was a round little man with a red face and a whole box of tools with dials and wires. He smiled at her and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Margie had hoped he wouldn't know how to put it together again, but he knew how all right. And after an hour or so, there it was again, large and black and ugly, with a big screen on which all the lessons were shown and the questions were asked. That wasn't so bad. The part she hated most was the slot where she had to put homework and test papers. She always had to write them out in a punch code they made her learn when she was 6 years old, and the mechanical teacher calculated the mark in no time. The inspector had smiled after he was finished and patted her head. He said to her mother, it's not the little girl's fault, Mrs. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared a little too quick. Those things happen sometimes. I've slowed it up to an average 10-year level. Actually, the overall pattern of her progress is quite satisfactory. And he patted Margie's head again. Margie was disappointed. She'd been hoping they would take the teacher away altogether. They had once taken Tommy's teacher away for nearly a month because the history sector blanked out completely. So she said to Tommy, why would anyone write about school? Tommy looked at her with very superior eyes. Because it's not our kind of school, stupid. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds and hundreds of years ago. He added loftily, pronouncing the word carefully, centuries ago. Margie was hurt. Well, I don't know what kind of school they had all that time ago. She read the book over his shoulder for a while, then said, anyway, they had a teacher. Sure, they had a teacher, but it wasn't a regular teacher. It was a man. A man? How could a man be a teacher? Well, he just told the boys and girls things and gave them homework and asked them questions. A man isn't smart enough. Sure he is. My father knows as much as my teacher. He can't. A man can't know as much as a teacher. He knows almost as much, I betcha. Margie wasn't prepared to dispute that. She said, I wouldn't want a strange man in my house to teach me. Tommy screamed with laughter. You don't know much, Margie. The teachers didn't live in the house. They had a special building and all the kids went there. And all the kids learned the same thing? Sure, if they were the same age. But my mother says a teacher has to be adjusted to fit the mind of each boy and girl it teaches, and that each kid has to be taught differently. Just the same, they didn't do it that way then. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the book. I didn't say I didn't like it, Margie said quickly. She wanted to read about those funny schools. They weren't even half finished when Margie's mother called, Margie, school. Margie looked up. Not yet, Mama. Now, said Mrs. Jones, and it's probably time for Tommy too. Margie said to Tommy, can I read the book some more with you after school? Maybe, he said nonchalantly. He walked away whistling, the dusty old book tucked beneath his arm. Margie went into the schoolroom. It was right next to her bedroom, and the mechanical teacher was on and waiting for her. It was always on at the same time every day, except Saturday and Sunday, because her mother said little girls learned better if they learned at regular hours. The screen was lit up and it said, today's arithmetic lesson is on the addition of proper fractions. Please insert yesterday's homework in the proper slot. Margie did so with a sigh. She was thinking about the old schools they had when her grandfather's grandfather was a little boy. All the kids from the whole neighborhood came, laughing and shouting in the schoolyard, sitting together in the schoolroom, going home together at the end of the day. They learned the same thing so they could help one another on the homework and talk about it. And the teachers were people. The mechanical teacher was flashing on the screen. When we add the fractions 1/2 and 1/4, Margie was thinking about how the kids must have loved it in the old days. She was thinking about the fun they had. Okay, so Isaac Asimov, you'll notice, born in 1920, Russian-born American writer. How did he know? How did he know the influence of artificial intelligence and what it would be like? 73 years ago. Let me just paint a picture for you. In 1951, we had black and white TVs, 3 channels. There were no, home computers. There were no home cell phones. Yeah. And I love how he compares, big black screen as her schoolroom. So let's look at our story elements. Obviously, we have 2 characters, Margie and Tommy, but of course, Margie is the most important character here. The story begins with a description of a mechanical teacher being serviced, reprogrammed, if you will. Margie is journaling the events of the day. So when you journal something, it's the highlights. What's the most profound of your day? What is clear is Margie hated school and really didn't want the computer to be fixed. Margie writes about her friend Tommy, who brings this print book. First of all, they're fascinated with a print book. Well, yeah, print books basically are historical archives, right? They were the first written record of humanity, so they're important. And we look at, he wrote this in 1951 before ebooks. And I love how he described telebooks with the words moving on the page. I think that would be a little confusing, but that's what he envisioned an ebook being. And even today, ebooks are not as popular as print books. In 2023, $79 billion was sold in print books. 8 billion was sold in ebooks. And there was a thought that ebooks would take over print books. And that just never transpired. It never happened because we humans prefer print books. We like to touch them. It's sensory. We can see them, we can touch them, we can flip the pages, and there's a smell. It's called lignin that's in the pages. And they're more immersive. When you're on your ebook, or I guess a telebook, there's going to be distractions, a notification, or just the fact that you're on a technology device. So she's fascinated by books, and you'll notice Tommy doesn't want to put the book down. And then, of course, the subject matter is about schools in the past. And this has Margie really paying attention. Wait, they had a teacher? And notice in 1951, yeah, there were male teachers, not female. Females worked in the home, ladies. Yeah. And today you can't catch a man in an elementary classroom or middle school, maybe high school. Most of them want to be principals or a college level. Yeah. So it became a female job because the men didn't mind, honestly. So the rising action here, this sparks a conversation, and the climax of the story is really when she realizes, wait, they didn't have machines as teachers and they got to go to school? What? And this intrigues her. Margie, by the end, finds the idea of schoolhouses and kids learning from real teachers to be preferable. So this is the future world. We know the exact date, May 17th, 2155. So this story was written to show the dehumanizing aspects of computers and machine learning and how they cannot replace people. And it was written in 1951. And isn't it crazy that that still applies today? The story expresses a subtle message about what can be lost with technological advancement. So if you go to page 5, I've kind of written basically how school was depicted in the story. No real person who's a teacher. The teacher is a machine, a computer, which can be physically taken apart or programmed. And you're sitting here going, oh, this is not going to happen. It's already happening. There is a private school in Austin, and they have AI teachers, no teachers. So when Tommy finds a real book with printed pages on it, they describe the contrast between printed books and telebooks. And we know that today in 2024, that ebooks have not taken off. Print books still hold, traditional value. Margie recalled her grandfather describing books with words, but had no concept what it meant. Margie's geography teacher was essentially a robot programmed specifically to her academic abilities. It seemed to be malfunctioning. Was it malfunctioning? Because I kind of got the impression that Margie just kind of stopped caring, right? So you'll notice he's the inspector guy who came in and reprogrammed it, slowed it down. Yeah. So Margie described the television screen as large and black and ugly. That's 1951. Called it pretty well, didn't he? Lessons were posted and questions were asked by a machine. Margie submitted assignments in a slot where she placed homework and test papers, writing them out in a punch code where the mechanical teacher gave her score almost immediately. Yeah, I think we're a little bit slower as teachers. We don't give you that feedback, but we're a lot gentler in how we give feedback. You have failed, retake the test, I think is probably what, that would give you. Tommy described to Margie how schools in the past, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, centuries ago, had a real person, a man. And then she says, could a teacher, a man, be as smart as AI? That's a really good question. And the answer is, of course, no. Let me give you an analogy. Let's say I'm an oncologist, a cancer doctor, and I have a patient with a specific cell, cancerous cell, and I want to know how to treat that. It would take my human brain days, hours, weeks to look up all of the case studies, even globally, where this type of cell and this type of cancer and how it was treated. I could put that in an AI tool and in seconds know the best kind of treatment that has worked with other oncologists, with other, even around the world, and really have a list of options to treat my patient. So no, we are not as smart. We couldn't be. But we have something that a computer does not have. We have emotion, we have understanding, we have compassion. And that is lacking in a computer. So Tommy explained his father knew as much. So obviously, who's programming computers? AI, human beings, right? Margie then expressed concern she didn't want a strange man teaching in her house. What's really funny here, she's describing a private tutor. The affluent and the wealthy do this today. Tommy then described that kids went to basically a schoolhouse and taught and learned together, everyone in the same grade level. And then Margie says, well, my mom says the mechanical teacher adjusts to fit the mind of each boy and girl it teaches, so it can be taught differently. That's kind of already happening in schools too, with map testing. Or, it can accelerate you based on your level. This is AP courses in high school, GT. Margie hated school and didn't want to go back, even when it was fixed by the end of the story. And all she's thinking about is how it used to be better in the past. So that's going to kind of set us up for our essay today. Yay! So I think this is going to be kind of a fun one, and I don't do persuasive essays very often. So our lead today, in Isaac Asimov's fantasy story, The Fun They Had, written in 1951, he wrote about a futuristic world where artificial intelligence, and you have to write that out one time, then you can put AI, ruled how kids learned. The story begins with the description of a mechanical teacher being taken apart. Margie, the main character, is journaling about the events of the day. What is clear at the beginning of the story is Margie hated school and hoped the teacher could not be fixed immediately. Margie wrote about her friend Tommy, who brought over an old print book he found in his attic at home to share with her. This sparked a conversation between Margie and Tommy about books and schools in the past and how they compared to theirs. Margie finds out in the past kids were taught by real people instead of machines and becomes curious about what school was like in the past. So here's what we're going to prove today. Many educators argue with new technological advancement in AI. Students today who spend hours each day looking at a screen miss out on traditional ways of schooling with more personal interactions. And that's not hard to prove, because look what happened during the pandemic with online learning. Massive fail. We can all attest to that. Now, this is like future of that. This is, really a program doing everything it could possibly do, and you're still stuck at home. So body one, in Isaac Asimov's futuristic world of education, there are 3 valid reasons Margie dislikes school and preferred the idea of traditional schooling from the past. So you're going to give 3 reasons why she disliked it and why she's right. Okay, so first off, second off, and third, notice those bold introductory words. You can also notice them on the back. And there are 2 reasons we use transition words. And the first is so the reader knows when you're moving to the next point. And the second is actually for the writer. You'll notice the first argument's nice and long. The second one's really short, and the third one's pretty comparable to the first. I would go in and look at that as the writer and say, okay, I need to add a little bit more there. We want to make sure they're equally weighted. So the second body paragraph, you will notice the first one's kind of weak, and the second and third are really strong. So it actually gives the writer a visual as well. Okay, so first off, Margie learned from a mechanical teacher instead of a real person. She had a problem with that. And I'm guessing you all did too during the pandemic. So your job is to explain why this could be a problem. And here's what your peers came up with. A robot has no emotion. It does not care. Whereas a real teacher is going to be understanding and work with a student, which is probably why Margie got discouraged, right? There's no caring. This is not a teacher who makes it fun, right? Secondly, Margie was stuck at home all day by herself, sitting in front of a giant screen. I think we all know what that was like. It was lonely. There's a sense of boredom because it's just you in the screen. You feel disconnected, distracted even. And this is why Margie lost motivation. I saw this in the pandemic with my own students. I saw it with my daughter and my son. It is not effectual when you have just this, and if you're watching this like this, you need to probably make sure you get to a class, right? You need to be in with your peers. You need to see me in person. This is not effective. It's okay for a last resort, but it shouldn't be the way you're learning. And number three, even though Margie's mom explained to her a computer could pace the learning to better fit Margie, she missed out. She missed out on peers, socialization. She missed out on discussion, groups, community, discussing concepts. So the story made it clear how AI may be the wave of the future, but it cannot compete with the human contact provided from past schooling. So I think that's easy to prove. And what I did in class is we wrote down all of this on the outline. So we knew body two, present day schools are leaning towards AI more and more. However, private and public schools today are better than those presented in Isaac Asimov's Modern World. First off, schools today hire real teachers to instruct students. Why is that important? And a school, one of your peers this week, a fellow student said, my teacher makes it fun. We try to. We try to make it engaging. We try to work with you. And if it's not working, we want your feedback. Secondly, socializing with peers is preferable to being stuck at home in front of a screen. We thrive, students and teachers, on social connections, just hanging out with friends, going to lunch, just, talking in the hallways between classes, competing with them, other students. It helps. Third, traditional books have historic relevance and cannot be replaced by, telebooks or ebooks. Students prefer print books over online books. And by the way, it's been statistically proven, if a parent is watching, that if a student reads a textbook that's print book versus online, or a novel that's print versus online, they will learn more, have deeper memory and cognition on the print book. Yet schools are still buying ebook textbooks and ebook novels. Why? Because it's cheaper. Just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's better. When I did this with my high school kids, I said, if you have, something over a novel, go get the paperback novel at Half Price Books or something. We need the sensory, turning the pages, looking at the book, smelling the book, having the book in our hands without the distractions. So the story made it clear how Margie hated school. It was impersonal, lonely, and failed to engage her to want to learn. And that's exactly what we saw happen to education. So Isaac Asimov's innovative story, The Fun They Had, served as a warning. What could happen to the future of education if technology replaced humans, as shown through the eyes of the unhappy Margie who hated school? And I think this is a great predictor, because if schools today are willing to buy e-textbooks and ebooks, I don't see how they won't save money not having to, have kids have a place to school. and not have to hire teachers. If they could save money, they would do it in a heartbeat. When Margie discovered kids in the past attended schoolhouses with students all learning the same concepts in one space, and they were able to share time together, she was intrigued because she hated modern day school. Towards the end of the story, it appeared Margie found the idea of schoolhouses and kids learning from real teachers to be preferable over machine learning from home. Asimov's inventive story, though told 73 years ago, envisioned a world where students in the future learn through AI while at home. Back then, it was a cautionary tale showing what could go wrong if educators rely on machines to teach the young minds of the future. Given the present day influence of technology, it would seem Asimov was correct in his predictions. That's what makes this story genius. He's spot on. Yeah. So this concludes May lesson number 3. And if for any reason you watched all 3 Zoom classes, you need to rethink being in my program because you're not getting the value out of it. And maybe come back when you can commit to doing that. And that goes to any parent that's watching. This is not the ideal way as shown through this story today. I hope you come back for the summer, and I will be here all summer. And that's it. Please respond as soon as possible with an essay response, and I appreciate you watching. Have a great week.